Hi guys. How about another chapter of Scumble? Here we go with chapter 8. When we last left off, oh, Ledge had just blown apart the whole barn, and now the sheriff is showing up to see what's going on at Uncle Audrey's ranch. All right, so here we go, chapter 8. We all watched the sheriff park his truck and climb out of the hole where the door should have been. The last of the dust from the barn settled, revealing the dented silver yowl of the moon, and the basin of the ranch became a patchwork quilt of moonlight and moving shadows. Built like a pro wrestler long past prime, with muscles gone the way of beer and jello, the sheriff strode forward, his gait a cautious saunter. As he pulled out a flashlight and aimed the beam in our direction, Uncle Autry moved to intercept him. Sheriff Brown, Jonas, what a surprise! Autry offered his hand to the officer, greeting him like an old friend. What in the blazes happened here, Autry? Your barn, it. The sheriff trailed off, removing his hat and pointing at the rubble. Fell down, Uncle Autry nodded, praising the wreckage alongside the sheriff. My uncle crossed his arms and clucked his tongue once with a shake of his head as if to say, they sure don't build barns the way they used to. I knew you were having a party tonight, the sheriff continued, but you're supposed to raise the roof, not knock it in. He panned the beam of his flashlight up the river toward the bug house. At least your spare's still standing. Is everyone okay? The flashlight's beam came back around, moving between the wreckage and the scattered family members, some of whom were already leaving, too shy of too much unwanted attention. Dolly's jars, all gone! I could hear Great Aunt Jules bemoaning the loss of her sister's savvy life's work as she snuck toward her car. Her wedding jar, too. What a tragedy! When the light from the sheriff's flashlight caught the still bleeding gash in Fish's face and the drops of red staining Mellie's dress, he let the beam linger and fumbled for his two-way, preparing to call for help. Don't tell me we were the only ones who felt that earthquake, young man. Grandpa Bomba's voice surprised everyone as it rose, quavering, from the overstuffed armchair that now sat in the middle of the drive. Sheriff Brown smiled at Grandpa, raising one eyebrow. Earthquake? No need to worry about one of those, sir. There haven't been more than 2 earthquakes worth paying any mind to in Crook County in the last 100 years. You're probably right about that, officer. You're probably right. Grandpa nodded and wobbled his head. But there was a mischief in the old man's eyes. Grandpa sat straighter now, as if he suddenly remembered what it felt like to be 20 years younger and 10 times stronger. And the ground under Jonas Brown poppled and surged, nearly knocking the officer off his feet. And whether it was the moonlight playing tricks on me or something real, I caught a glimpse of Samson Beaumont, now standing tall at 16, and standing with his hand on Grandpa Bomba's shoulder, as thin as a slip of shadow and just as transparent. But the moment I blinked, the vision was gone. You've got to watch out for them aftershocks, Grandpa said, giving me a wink that made me wonder if he was talking to me or Sheriff Brown. That's enough, Dad, Mom told Grandpa, getting up from where she'd been crouched over me. Everyone sucked in their breath as Mom turned toward the unsuspecting sheriff. Slowly, Mom advanced on the officer, her savvy smile drawn and ready. Dad pulled me up off the ground by my collar. Here she goes, he said under his breath. Sheriff, Mom said, why don't you tell us what brought you here tonight so that you can continue on your way? You can see there's nothing here for you to be concerned about. Her smile grew wider. You can forget about the barn now. Yes. Sheriff Brown's speech grew muddled. Nothing here to worry about, nothing at all. I just came looking for a lost girl. Forgetting about the fallen barn, as Mom had instructed, the sheriff turned back to my uncle. Cabot's girl has run off again, Autry. I'm sure she'll turn up when she's done chasing stories, but I've been making the rounds in case anyone's seen her. Sarah Jane? A deep frown creased Autry's brow. Sorry, Jonas, I haven't seen her. How long has she been gone? Brown snorted his reply. Just since this morning. But you know Noble Cabot. He's got me out combing the hills. Sarah Jane slipped past the housekeeper before breakfast. What makes you think she might have come this way? Brown scratched his head. Willie said she was in his shop earlier today making copies of those tomfool papers of hers, he smiled. That one about Bigfoot staying at the bed and breakfast really had me going. I almost dropped by to take a look. The girl writes whoppers and steel traps where other folks write words and sentences. Finding himself chuckling, Brown stopped and straightened his belt. Apparently, Sarah Jane took off at the same time as a couple of other kids who were in his shop today. A young girl wearing a football helmet and an older boy, brother or sister maybe. Willie said the girl mentioned your ranch and the wedding here tonight, so I thought I'd give it a shot. Well, I was also hoping the kids might have seen what happened here, he added, pointing his flashlight toward the large hole in his vehicle. My truck got busted up about the same time the kids were in Willie's shop. My truck and one of Gus Neary's motorcycles, which fared a heap worse. The entire thing's in pieces. Looks like someone took the whole bike apart quicker than grass through a goose. I held my breath as everyone but the sheriff looked from the truck to the barn to me. Sheriff Brown and maybe 7-year-old Tucker Beaumont, who stood picking his nose by his papa, were the only ones who didn't understand immediately that I was responsible for the destruction. All the destruction, both here and in town. Autry raised his eyebrows. Dad cleared his throat and pulled me behind him quickly. Mom, Mibs, and Aunt Jenny all moved to block the sheriff's view of Fedora where she knelt, picking up scattered jar lids the same way she'd scrabbled for her fallen change inside the 5 and dime. Having removed her helmet, she now filled it with as many loose lids as she could, like it was a pot of gold at the end of the disaster. The sheriff didn't notice. He had other concerns. I thought Willie was going to have a stroke, worrying that he'll be sent to the top of Cabot's list just for letting Sarah Jane step foot inside of his store, Brown went on. Like everyone else in these parts, Willie owes Cabot his pound of flesh, and more than a few mortgage payments. Listen, Autry. The sheriff stepped closer to my uncle, lowering his voice. The last thing you need right now is Noble Cabot thinking Sarah Jane's been hanging around up here. Doesn't take much for any of us to become a spindle in Cabot's fire, and there's enough trouble between you and him already. Nothing I can't handle, Jonas. Autry brushed aside the sheriff's warning, but his hands clenched into fists. Marisol and Mesquite moved forward to stand closer to their dad. Ooh, hey guys, I'm going to step out of the story a sec. Did you notice that? The author just dropped a clue. I'm going to read that again, and I want you to listen for the show don't tell. Nothing I can't handle, Jonas. Uncle Autry brushed aside the sheriff's warning, but his hands clenched into fists. There's that clue. It's letting you know something's coming. Marisol and Mesquite moved forward to stand closer to their dad. Look, Autry, the sheriff continued, every time that girl takes off, old Noble gets cranky, and a cranky Noble Cabot is bad for Sundance. A cranky Cabot is bad for us all. Sarah Jane hasn't been here, Jonas, Autry assured the other man. I closed my eyes, feeling the low-down shame of knowing different. What about the kids from Willie's shop? Do you know anything about... Time for you to go now, Sheriff, Mom cut in, smiling. Brown paused, checking his watch in the glow from his flashlight. Time for me to go, he echoed mechanically, moving back in the direction of the truck. Let me know if you see hide or hair, Sarah Jane. Watching the sheriff go, I began to shake. Are you all right, Ledge? Autry asked, coming to stand next to me. I nodded, saying nothing, trying not to flinch, as the snaps on my uncle's shirt began to pop off one by one and ping down to the gravel. Autry looked down at his missing snaps and shook his head. I wondered if this would be the final straw. The thing that tipped the scales and triggered a total meltdown tongue lashing from my uncle. But to a guy who'd give you the shirt off his back, apparently a couple of snaps and an entire barn were nothing. When Autry looked up, he was grinning. Dude, you are a bulldozer. He shook his head again. What a powerhouse. Imagine what you'll be able to do once you finesse that a little. I couldn't imagine. I'd wrecked everything. The barn, the wedding, Dad's dreams, not to mention my hopes of ever having any kind of normal life. Where was the finesse in that? I'd even robbed Grandpa of the perfect comfort in his final days. All of Grandma's jars were smashed to smithereens. All but one. And I'd let that one get away. While Sarah Jane Cabot may not have known what it meant to have a savvy, she'd seen enough to start asking all the wrong questions. Now, with Grandma's last surviving jar, she had what every good reporter wants most: proof. As the lights of Jonas Brown's truck disappeared over the South Ridge, I prayed again. Prayed that this would be the last time I'd ever see the Crook County Sheriff. Prayed that Mom and Dad wouldn't go back to Indiana without me. Prayed that they wouldn't leave me on the Misfit Ranch with the twins, with Rocket, just another three-legged dog like Betsy. But even as I prayed, I knew that my prospects didn't look too good. All right, there's the end of chapter 8. I'll be back in a little while with chapter 9. Have a good day, guys.